Hi, my name is Ashley Belknap, and I'm the Director of Engaging Disability with the Gospel. And we are so glad that you have joined us for our first episode of Questions and Answers with Engaging Disability with the Gospel. Each week, we want to come into your home with questions you are asking. That might be parents of kids with disabilities, that might be church leaders or volunteers with questions, it might be adults. Caregivers who have questions. We want to hear what's on your mind, and we want to try to answer those questions in really helpful, succinct ways. So without further ado, we're going to dive right in. We have 3 questions today that I'm going to attempt to answer. All of them are related to this unique time that we find ourselves in, where we're homebound and encouraged to social distance due to the coronavirus. And so the first question comes from a viewer who says, I'm finding that our people and families with disabilities are not engaging in online opportunities. Can you give any insight, and what should we do? So those are great questions. The first thing that I can say is to always remember that everyone, you, me, and all of our families impacted by disability, do things for really good reasons. Behaviors are influenced by surrounding context, environment, what's going on, what's not going on at home. And so one of the things we need to make sure that we don't do during this unique season is assume that everything that is online is now easily accessible to our families impacted by disability. We just released a resource a couple of days ago, which will be linked in the notes section under this video, of considerations that you should ask as you're getting to know what this new normal is like for your families who are impacted by disability. For example, are they going faster? Or are they going slower? Is our mom and dad now 24/7 caregiving? Or a spouse 24/7 caregiving along with working at home? We've lost maybe therapies and support systems. Maybe school isn't what they want it to be, and parents are having to work harder to not have skill regression happen. Understanding those behind the scenes factors will help you understand what your families might be interested in engaging in and what they might not. Other things to consider are whether or not your families are impacted by unique behaviors in their kids, teens, or adults with disabilities. That can be problem behaviors, or just not being able to recognize social cues and talking when it's inappropriate. And so Zoom calls can be really challenging in those ways because social cues are even harder to read when you have a screen full of people. You're not really sure who to look at, who's talking, who's going to be talking next. Turn taking takes on a whole new approach. Even the best of us have talked over people on Zoom. And so some families may feel like the video and the audio format is more intrusive or invasive because of what their child, teen, or adult is or isn't able to do on a social media platform or a social context like Zoom. So it may be that simple steps towards your family, such as encouraging, you don't have to show your video, you don't have to talk, you can keep your microphone muted the whole time, encourages them to join at a distance, and then when they're comfortable, they can choose to share and be more involved. I also think as we have gotten further into this and realized how much busyness that has been brought about because of coronavirus for kids, teens, and young adults, especially who are doing school online, some families are doing 10, 14, 16 Zoom calls a day. And so keeping in mind that they just may be Zoom called out, and they may be exhausted from caregiving or from keeping up with all the details in a new way. It takes 30 days for us to develop new habits and routines that stick and last, and we are maybe a little over halfway to that. So folks are still learning. So I would say grant grace, try to understand what your families are going through behind the scenes, and use that to figure out what they might be interested in joining and why they might not be joining what you have already put out there. Okay, question number 2. Again, for question number 1, refer to our resource at the bottom. I think you'll find a lot of good ideas there. Number 2, we are having lots of difficulties with online worship. Parents of kids with disabilities want to watch the online sermons, but their child with a disability is not engaged. How can we help? Great question. I am actually going to be teaching an online training on next Tuesday, which is April the 14th. And I would encourage you to register for that. We will put the link below. It will give you the 45-minute version of what I'm getting ready to say in a couple of sentences, and will expand on giving families a plan for building skills and for dealing with problem behaviors and for working towards a place where they're all engaged in worship together and not fighting against some of the problems that they're experiencing. So make sure to pass along our online training to your families, encourage them to sign up. And then here is the bite-sized answer. So I think a lot of times we come in with great expectations. It's an online platform, and so kids can be louder. They're not able to be seen in a live stream. We're viewing someone on the computer. So it's safe in that way to invite kids. They can be a little louder, they can move around, but then comes the problem that they're not engaged in worship, and it's harder for mom and dad to be engaged in worship. Some of our kids, teens, and adults may have separate options during their normal worship time, or may be dismissed to children's church, and so there we're dealing with a lot longer of a time to keep our kids engaged. And again, I would say up front that patterns, twofold. Number one, it's hard to break routines and patterns. So what you are used to at church, just granting yourself some grace and space, that it takes a little longer to undo some of those expectations and norms. And then on the flip side, to replace those with new rhythms and routines that work and that are sustainable. It takes time. It just really does take time, especially with our unique learners. So what can I offer in this platform? A couple of thoughts. Number one, I would think very carefully about what goals you have. So you may say, big picture, I want my child to be able to sit here for an hour and worship. And I say, okay, great. That might be our end goal. But that might not be what is accomplishable on week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, even 10, 12, 13, 14. Instead, we want to take that big goal and we want to break it down into smaller parts that make our kids, teens, and adults successful. It is much easier to avoid problem behavior than it is to troubleshoot once those problems arise. Those problems often become embedded or attached or paired with activities that they want out of, or that they are not able to don't have the skills that they need in order to fully engage and access them. So I would rather us break down the whole hour chunk into smaller goals that we can do on a weekly basis. That's what we're going to talk about in our training, along with a couple of other big picture questions of how do we troubleshoot problem behavior. So take your end goal, and we want to break it down into small parts, and we want to celebrate the victories in those small pieces. If your child or teen has an attention span that is 5-6 minutes and we're asking them to sit for 20, you are not likely going to be able to reach that 20-minute mark and celebrate. You're probably going to have problem behavior. But if your attention span is 8 minutes and we set our first goal for 4 minutes and a break, and then we come back, that 4 minutes might be really doable, and we can celebrate that with something that kid, teen, or adult really wants access to, and offer a little break, and then come back for the second part for another 4 minutes. And then we gradually increase our time. That's one strategy. Again, we're going to talk about lots of strategies. I do think it's important for parents to examine their own expectations on what we're really wanting to have happen, and then how do we get there. Most people don't have a plan, and they just sit and expect their kids to be able to color or do Play-Doh or sit quietly for the hour and then get frustrated when it doesn't happen. Remember, this is a training opportunity, and what I'll say over and over again in our big version of this is that we have a unique opportunity to set our kids up and our teens up, our adults up, for learning to worship now at home, where there isn't as much pressure to be completely quiet or to be perfectly still. We can alter the environment a little bit to work in our favor. We can even do things unique like pausing for a moment to catch our breath and then going again. So this is a unique training time that can really be used so that when we get back to church together in corporate worship, we are better able to make that transition into the sanctuary with ease. Okay, question number 3. What simple, easy tips do you have for ways to engage families with disabilities during COVID-19? So this is a great question. This is also included in that article below, that is linked below. I do think it's important to do things that are easy, small steps that are well received by your families and that are doable on the part of everyone who, during this season right now, even our volunteers and our church people, our ministry people, there's lots of new responsibilities. So yes, we're going slower, but that doesn't always equal more time. So I would think about things that fall into the genre of their favorites. What are some of the favorites that your folks, your families really enjoyed and looked forward to at church? That might be that they loved giving a high five to someone every day, every Sunday morning on the way into the service. Or maybe they looked forward to being the person who hands out the bulletins at the back door of the sanctuary. Or maybe they loved Sunday school because of a certain song that was sung. Or maybe they really looked forward to seeing a certain person. Those favorites can be recorded and then texted to your family or emailed to your family, and which allows them to watch on their own time, and it allows replay over and over again. A small hello and a greeting from a person that was a favorite that's now missing could mean more than anything you drop by their house. I would also think about creative ways during this week of Easter that you might drop real life, tangible things by a mailbox. Everybody loves a surprise. Maybe you could drop an Easter happy in a mailbox. Maybe it's an extra devotional book you have for caregivers. Maybe it's Easter eggs filled with candy for the kids. Maybe it's something that you print out that's a short devotional that they can use on Good Friday. Maybe it's a real life craft, but you've gone to the trouble to put all the supplies in there so that all they have to do is sit down and enjoy together. Something that's real and tangible often goes a really long way with our kids, teens, and adults with disabilities, and not just the virtual platform. So those are 2 simple tips. There's 3 or more, maybe even 4 more in the article below. So I hope you will check that out. And as always, please submit your questions. You can do that on Facebook. You can do that via our email, and you will see that on the following slide. We want to hear from you. So ask any question. No questions too big or small for us to answer. And we look forward to seeing you next week.